What Stephanie White had to say, shall we?
All right, y'all. Great job. Great job. We did a lot of great.
First things first, before we get into this, I never want to see this much of Stephanie White's arms ever again.
That right there is what passive aggression looks like in professional basketball. Stephanie White just coached a win against the Las Vegas Aces without A'ja Wilson, and instead of celebrating her team's effort, she's taking shots at the player who put butts in seats all season long. That locker room speech wasn't a pep talk, it was a message, and Caitlin Clark heard it loud and clear, even though she wasn't in the building.
Let's just keep it a buck. Stephanie, put the blazer on, put a t-shirt on, put a long sleeve shirt. You don't see me walking around in guinea tees in front of the camera, do you? Let's hear what you got to say.
All right, y'all. Great job. Great job. We did a lot of great things. I'm sure this has to be.
Stephanie White may have earned a win over the Las Vegas Aces without A'ja Wilson on the floor, but it was her post-game comments that grabbed the most attention. Rather than focusing only on her team's performance, many felt her words were aimed at Caitlin Clark, the player widely credited with drawing huge crowds and boosting fan interest all season. What sounded like a celebration to some came across as a subtle message to others, making it seem less like a motivational speech and more like a pointed statement. Even though Caitlin Clark wasn't there to hear it in person, the message appeared loud and clear.
I'm sorry, folks. That's my bad. The Indiana Fever played yesterday as well. The Indiana Fever went up against the A'ja Wilson-less Las Vegas Aces. So you have the Indiana Fever without Caitlin Clark. You have the Las Vegas Aces without A'ja Wilson. I see some people cheering and doing backflips because the Indiana Fever beat the Las Vegas Aces without A'ja Wilson.
7 turnovers, a season low. The message seemed obvious. Take care of the ball and you'll give yourself a better chance to win. To many people, it sounded like an indirect shot at Caitlin Clark, standing at the podium with her notes. Stephanie White appeared determined to highlight every point that critics believe reflects poorly on her star player. Instead of looking like a coach focused only on her team's success, it came across as a political move, raising more questions about what's really happening inside the organization. The Indiana Fever defeated a Las Vegas Aces team that was missing its biggest star, yet the conversation quickly shifted to the idea that the Fever might be better without their own franchise player. Many found that reasoning hard to understand. With A'ja Wilson resting, likely to stay healthy for the playoffs, the situation gave Stephanie White a perfect storyline, and critics believe she used the moment to make subtle remarks about the rookie many credit with bringing new life and attention to the franchise.
Taking shots at her star player, throwing shade at her star player. That's the news coming out of the game. That is the story coming out of the game. Stephanie White's slow, methodical, tiresome, knockdown, drag out, boring brand of basketball. They beat the Los Angeles Sparks, no Kelsey Plum, no Cameron Brink. They beat the Las Vegas Aces, no A'ja Wilson. A game that Becky Hammon did Stephanie White a solid and said, Kennedy Carter, keep your ass on the bench. You're not really going to play a lot.
From the very beginning, the story was presented in a way that built extra excitement. It started by talking about England winning in a tough road environment, then shifted to Norway, and only afterward mentioned the Indiana Fever's victory, creating a sense that the game carried major importance. The main fact, however, was that the Fever defeated a Las Vegas Aces team, playing without A'ja Wilson. Even so, the coverage made it sound like they had accomplished something far bigger. Many critics argue that beating a team missing its top player should be viewed with the proper context, not as definitive proof that one roster is better or that a certain offensive system is the answer. They compare it to celebrating a victory over a football team without its star quarterback or a basketball team missing its greatest player, saying those wins rarely lead to sweeping conclusions. Yet this game is being treated as if it settled every debate.
At the end of the game, I smell something fishy here. Uh-oh. Got Stephanie White. Come here, Becky. Give me a hug. Come here. Give me a hug. Give me a hug. This is it. This is what happened right here. This is what happened right here. Come here, Becky. Give me a hug. Give me a hug. Yeah, thank you for sitting, kid.
Stephanie White's system has become a major topic of discussion, with many describing it as slow, deliberate, and focused on controlling the pace rather than playing with speed and aggression. According to critics, the offense emphasizes limiting possessions instead of creating fast-scoring opportunities. They argue that this style naturally works better without a dynamic playmaker who thrives in transition and creates offense on the move. From that perspective, the issue isn't the star player, but the system itself. If an offensive approach appears to run more smoothly without the most gifted offensive talent the franchise has ever had, some believe the bigger question is whether the system is designed to get the best out of elite players. They point to Caitlin Clark's average of more than 5 assists per game as evidence of the impact she can have when given the freedom to create opportunities for her teammates. As a rookie, Caitlin Clark averaged more than 5 assists per game while also leading her team in scoring, making her impact impossible to ignore. Yet some of the attention has shifted towards celebrating a game with only 7 turnovers against a shorthanded opponent, as if that alone proves the team has found the right formula. The Indiana Fever earned wins over the Los Angeles Sparks without Kelsey Plum and Cameron Brink, and later defeated the Las Vegas Aces without A'ja Wilson. Critics argue that using those victories as proof of a major breakthrough ignores the fact that both opponents were missing key players. In their view, what the Fever have really shown is that they can beat injury-depleted teams while their own franchise star recovers. They believe that approach is unlikely to hold up over the long season and will face a much tougher test against fully healthy championship contenders.
Not to mention covering her face when she's talking. Yeah. Why is White dressed like Michael Jackson? Well, you know what? Like Michael Jackson, she needs to beat it. Just beat it. Yeah, she needs to get out of here. Fixed, rigged, and corrupt. Aces just handed us the win so they can move from first place to second. Just stop being ridiculous. We all do. Never good when they go for a mouth cover at the end of the game. And now during the game, they threw this graphic out here.
After the game, Becky Hammon and Stephanie White were seen smiling and talking, a moment that quickly caught people's attention. Some viewers felt their body language looked unusually relaxed for 2 coaches who had just finished a competitive matchup, especially with the conversation taking place while covering part of their faces and sharing a laugh. That naturally sparked speculation online, but the only facts that can be confirmed are what was visible on camera. The Las Vegas Aces played without their biggest star, and the post-game exchange between the 2 coaches became another talking point for fans looking for meaning beyond the final score. The discussion then shifted to Kennedy Carter and the role she played in the broader conversation. Kennedy Carter saw very limited playing time despite being available, raising questions among some fans. Although the game stayed close enough to appear competitive, critics argued that Las Vegas never seemed fully committed to pushing for the win in the 4th quarter. After the final buzzer, both coaches appeared satisfied with the outcome, leading to plenty of speculation. Some believe Becky Hammon accomplished her goal by resting A'ja Wilson to keep her healthy for the playoffs while preserving her MVP case. Others argue Stephanie White benefited by using the victory as evidence that her system can succeed even without relying on a ball-dominant rookie.
We have the Stephanie White locker room pep talk that fans are going off about, saying she's throwing shade at Caitlin Clark, she's taking shots at Caitlin Clark, she would rather not have Caitlin Clark on the team. A lot of comments, reactions regarding last night's game. The Indiana Fever, when they run Stephanie White's system without Caitlin Clark, they're better without Caitlin Clark when they run Stephanie White's system. They're not a better team, but they run that Stephanie White system better when they have a point guard that can't do the things that Caitlin Clark could do. A lot of reactions from yesterday.
Broadcast then displayed a graphic comparing the Fever's record with and without Caitlin Clark, showing similar win-loss totals and a small difference in plus-minus. That quickly led to television debates about whether Indiana might actually be better without its franchise player. Critics argue those numbers don't tell the full story. They point out that the sample size is too small and includes games from different situations, such as preseason contests, early season matchups against weaker teams, and recent wins over opponents dealing with major injuries. Meanwhile, the games with Clark include one of the toughest stretches of the season, one when she was adjusting to the professional level while facing constant defensive pressure and the challenges that come with being one of the league's most talked about rookies. Context is important, but simple statistics often attract more attention than the full story. That's why surface-level comparisons are sometimes presented as proof that the team performs better without Caitlin Clark. Some analysts argue the defense looks stronger, the ball moves more freely, and the assists are spread more evenly. While those observations may be accurate over a small number of games, critics believe they fail to answer the bigger question. They argue that short-term statistical trends should not outweigh the value of.
Well, Michael Jordan didn't really miss games like they missed games, but you guys get my point. The Indiana Fever beat the Las Vegas Aces without Asia Wilson. Woohoo! Woohoo! But Stephanie White doing the Stephanie White thing.
He describes the situation as if the league has become more like a reality show than a traditional professional sport, arguing that the focus has shifted from basketball to dramatic storylines. While that opinion is controversial, supporters of The View point to moments such as coaches appearing to criticize their own star players, media narratives that they believe don't match what happens on the court, and debates that seem driven more by attention than by basketball analysis. Critics argue that this creates the impression that entertainment is taking priority over competition. At the same time, many believe it's important to remember that the athletes are genuine professionals competing at the highest level, and their performances deserve to be judged on what happens during games. They argue that when storylines begin to feel manufactured instead of earned through competition, it can distract from the skill, effort, and legitimacy that women's basketball has worked for years to build. Critics argue that when coaching decisions appear to be made to prove a point instead of simply giving the team the best chance to win, and when media coverage focuses more on controversy than on performance, it becomes harder for fans to take the overall product seriously. They believe that's the perception surrounding the Indiana Fever right now. Rather than emphasizing the impact of a rookie who helped set viewership records and draw sold-out crowds across the league, building an offense that fully takes advantage of her unique abilities, and investing in the long-term future of the franchise, some believe the team is trying to show it can succeed without her. In their view, that approach reflects a focus on proving a coaching philosophy rather than pursuing the best possible results, raising questions about whether validation has become more important than maximizing the team's championship potential. Fan reactions show that many people are not buying the narrative. Critics say they noticed what they believe were subtle shots at Caitlin Clark and feel the messaging was intended to suggest the team performs better without its biggest star. In their view, the situation isn't difficult to interpret because Stephanie White's comments gave that impression to many viewers. At the same time, those critics argue the result should be viewed in context. They point out that the Fever defeated an opponent that was missing its top player and believed that one game against a shorthanded team is not enough to prove the system is better without its franchise player. They also argue that using a single performance to shift blame toward the team's biggest star is more about promoting a particular narrative than providing balanced basketball analysis. According to those critics, that is what makes the entire situation so controversial for the franchise moving forward. The situation also raises questions about the Indiana Fever's long-term future. Caitlin Clark is still playing on a rookie contract while generating unprecedented attention and revenue for the franchise. Yet some critics believe the organization is acting as though it can succeed without fully building around her. They wonder what could happen once her current contract ends and she gains greater influence over where she wants to play. Because player movement in the WNBA operates differently from other leagues, those critics argue that Clark could have attractive options if she ever decides she wants a different environment. From that perspective, the biggest concern is that the Fever could eventually face difficult questions from fans if they fail to maximize the talents of a player many consider a once-in-a-generation star. They believe the franchise's future may depend on creating a system that highlights her strengths rather than expecting her to fit into one that limits her impact, leaving Clark in the difficult position of watching the ongoing debate unfold while focusing on her recovery and return to the court. As Caitlin Clark recovers from injury, some critics believe the recent discussion around the team could be difficult for any star player to ignore. Instead of the team's success being viewed as a sign of improved depth, they argue it has been used to question her value. They believe comments praising lower turnover numbers and graphics comparing the team's record with and without her have helped create a narrative that places unnecessary focus on her role. From that perspective, critics worry that this kind of messaging could make it harder for a player to feel fully supported when returning from injury. They argue that strong team chemistry is built by making elite players feel trusted and empowered, not by treating them as obstacles to overcome. In their view, lasting success comes from building a system that maximizes the strengths of your best talent rather than creating an environment where that player's importance is constantly being debated. Critics argue that a team should build its strategy around the talent that gives it the best chance to win, rather than expecting elite players to fit into a rigid system. Looking back at Stephanie White's locker room speech, they believe the focus was less about celebrating the victory and more about highlighting statistics that could be interpreted as indirect criticism of Caitlin Clark. The mention of only 7 turnovers, a season low, was viewed by some as a reference to Clark's tendency to turn the ball over while creating offense. The praise for 13 offensive rebounds was seen as suggesting the team performed better in the half court instead of playing at Clark's preferred fast pace. Likewise, recognition of holding the opponent to 40% shooting in the second half was interpreted by some as implying the defense functioned better without having to account for Clark's perceived weaknesses. Supporters of this view argue that each positive statistic sounded less like simple praise for the team's effort and more like an indirect comparison with the franchise's biggest star. Believing the pattern was intentional rather than a coincidence, critics argue that the remarks sounded less like an emotional reaction after a win, and more like a carefully prepared message, aimed at the front office, the media, and Caitlin Clark herself.